conversion of Muslims that happened after Elijah died to the true form of Islam. So it wasn't like he harped on it, but yes, he could say, yeah, that was a mistake. But mistakes are meant for you to grow, and for you to look upon those mistakes and say, I needed to experience that. So yeah, I mean, he talked freely about that. And Malcolm and my father were two men who, although they were famous for who they were on a divine journey of truth, and they got to the same point before their death. But what gets hidden with all the celebrity of who they were is, what were these men seeking? And they were seeking their divine purpose was greater than their career purpose. And a lot of people miss that with all the films that are done. And most films are done with a bias. I love the film Blood Brothers, but I think if a family member or if a Muslim produced a film, you would have a different narrative. You know what I'm saying? And that would focus more on the spiritual and not on the conflict.
Absolutely. I think that was a great answer. And when you spoke a bit about the fact that these two men were on a divine mission, a divine assignment, but in their spirit that got them on their mission, they were seeking truth. They were seeking a greater understanding and a greater knowledge of themselves. As someone who grew up in the context of the Nation of Islam, the daughter of Muhammad Ali, seeing that these men who began in the Nation of Islam, the impact that teaching had on these two men. I heard you say in an interview before that there's a number of misconceptions about these two brothers being part of, an organization that was just all about anti-whiteness. They hated white people. They were vile. What was it about the Nation of Islam, the concept of knowledge of self, and what that organization was kicking at that time that attracted these two brothers and impacted their lives?
Well, first of all, there wasn't a community who was reaching out, an Islamic community that was, according to the Quran, Islam according to the Quran, that was reaching out to the Black population. The beauty of the Nation of Islam, there are many positive things about it, is that it was the entryway to true Islam. The Nation of Islam filled a void, and this is my opinion, filled a void in many African Americans for them to understand the oppression and atrocities that they experienced, for them to understand colonialism and how colonialism totally dismantled and destroyed the African continent and other continents as well. And racial terrorism was overwhelming. I mean, this is, we know what 400 years of slavery and Jim Crow did to our people. So the nation kind of answered that question. And unlike true Islam, what the nation did was they kind of, converted what white supremacists did in a way where they got demonized for to speak into racial hierarchy as the Black man being the source of God and the white man being the source of the devil. But for instance, intellectuals for centuries, even before slavery, had theories and claims of racial hierarchy. Aristotle, the great philosopher who contributed much to mankind, he propagated the theory of climate theory, where if you came from African or hot climates, you were inferior morally, intellectually, physically, biologically than people from cold climates. And the Puritans, and all of this was started, of course, to justify enslavement of African Americans, Africans. And the Puritans did something a little different. They did curse theory, where, Black man was cursed via the Bible. So when the nation came along, they had their racial hierarchy theory as well and inverted that. And it was the Black man is the source of God, the white man is the source of the devil. But Aristotle and the Puritans and numerous intellectuals for centuries who disseminated these claims of racial hierarchy. There's so many claims and disseminations of literature about that from the highest intellectuals. They never got demonized for doing it. So the nation, the way it was introduced by Master Farad Muhammad, who many of the nation felt was the embodiment of God and Elijah, the last prophet, said, okay, this is the answer. This has to be it. They were looking for an instruction or a reason why the white power structure were getting away with what they apparently seem to be getting away with, in the oppression of many different peoples all over the globe. So that was that. But again, true Islam, it's considered shirk, meaning you can't partner anyone with God. To be a true Muslim, you say La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah, meaning there's only one God, Allah, and Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not Elijah Muhammad. But again, I believe, God's destiny is real, and there's a reason for it. And the condition the black man and woman were in, I think it took the nation to address who they were before slavery, and what great civilizations were maintained in our motherland. And we weren't these just inferior individuals like some intellectuals had propagated for centuries. So yeah, the nation gave them that, and the nation cleaned brothers up. They had drug rehabilitation programs. My grandmother worked for the clothing store in Chicago. They had their own communities. They felt accountable despite oppression and injustice and lack of real freedom. They felt accountable to create their own and be in unity, like many of the cultural segments of America, Chinatown and Italian neighborhoods and Pakistani neighborhoods. They had their own bank, their own school, their own fish company, their own bakery, their own restaurant, their own import stores, exports, so they were, this was beautiful to see a religion that could clean up the drug addict, the prostitute, the alcoholic. And these are the parts of the nation that had that pure Islam within it, So I remember I was in the nation the first 7 years of my life, and I remember the community. But that news machine is putting the label hate. But the nation didn't massacre communities. The nation didn't lynch white people. The nation didn't bomb churches. The nation didn't kill police officers. The nation didn't enslave anyone. So this news machine, and this was so brilliant about Malcolm, is opening our eyes to this media machine that is labeling them as something when it's really the white power structure that was actually doing all of those things. So labeling it the hate group and the hate produced, all of that, it was a community of peace and love. But of course it had to fall because it wasn't the true Islam. It wasn't, there was corruption within it and power struggles. It wasn't true Islam. So but there was definitely it had its purpose for in our destination to become the true Islam. Right.
Got it. Thank you, May. I started to lose you a little bit at the end of the answer. Is my Wi-Fi over here or yours? Is the Wi-Fi over here? Can you hear me well, May?
Yeah. My Wi-Fi looks good.
Okay. I'm gonna see how it goes with the next question. Your father, being the global icon that he was, had access to everybody damn near in the world that he really wanted to talk to. In his pictures, you see him at the Ollie Center with Elvis, Kwame Nkrumah, President of Ghana, presidents of leaders all across the world. What would you say specifically guided your father and interested him and sustained his interest to have a relationship with Malcolm X as a brother and as a friend out of all the people in the world at the same time as him that he could have connected with?
To give that, can you hear me well? Can you hear me?
No? Not the best. I think.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's kind of cutting out.
Oh wow.
You want me to go get her?
Yeah.
You want me to go find her?
I heard the oh wow from her.
She out there?
There she is. It's just right there.
Let me go to 5G. Let me go to.
Okay, now so there are some seats up front if you want to come from the back.
Is that
better? I think it's just all the people now. Can't really do anything about it.
Okay. Well, brother, keep on going.
Yeah.
You can give it a shot.
Sean, is that better?
That was
say,
worse.
say something else.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
switched.
Can you hear me? That's better.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Can you hear me, man?
Yeah. Yes, I
Okay.
can hear
Should I call you on my phone? Okay.
You
Yeah,
can hear
we'll keep it with that.
I can hear you.
Okay. Go ahead with that question if you heard it all the way. What do you
Raise
think
your
guided
hand.
and sustained your
Raise your
father?
hand if you can't hear me. Raise your hand if you stop hearing me, okay?
All right, I got you.
Because you might want to use the phone and put me on speaker or something, put me on the microphone with your phone.
I got you. So can somebody hang that up real quick? And I'm gonna call. Cause y'all got to see her now, so she's in the room. Let's see.
There are a lot of people in there on the Wi-Fi, so
Yeah, it's okay.
yeah.
She's gonna answer here. Okay. Yeah.
All right. This is fun.
All right. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh no, but Sean, everything good?
Okay. Can you say something else?
Yeah.
Can you all hear?
All right, you can hear me? Okay, great. We figured it out. So yeah, I think a lot of people, they don't really know the backdrop, the context before they met. At 16 years old, my father was in Chicago doing an amateur boxing bout. He was 16 and he heard an album that really changed him. Minister Farrakhan, he wasn't a minister at that time, did an album called, maybe he was a minister, I'm not sure, but the album called The White Man's Heaven is the Black Man's Hell. If you go on YouTube, you could bring that album up and listen to it yourself. And the lyrics are very profound to my dad, explaining, the status of the African American in this country and why. And that was his introduction to kind of the nation philosophy in a way. And then he also saw a cartoon, one of those cartoon newspaper cartoons where they had a white man beating, from the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, that had a white man beating an enslaved African Muslim, telling him not to use that Arabic and not to pray, and that he could not practice his faith in this country. He couldn't be a Muslim. So these things triggered my dad to want to study the Nation of Islam. He got this introduction 4 years before he met Malcolm X. And then a couple years after he read the Muhammad Speaks and was listening to Farrakhan's song, he began studying the faith. And this is before he met Malcolm X. His main mentor in the nation was a brother named Abdul Rahman. They called him Captain Sam. He was like the man who kind of taught my dad a lot and mentored him. And then he met Malcolm 2 years before his fight with Sonny Liston. When he fought in 1964, he announced to the world he was now Muhammad Ali. He was in the Nation of Islam. And he had met Malcolm 2 years before that. So, Malcolm was a major, of course, figure in the nation. And after he joined, he organized the nation better than it had ever been organized. And membership grew exponentially because of him. That's why there's so much jealousy against him. He got the Muhammad Speaks newspaper together. He operationalized a lot of things within the nation to run smoothly. He did a lot of literature. Of course, he was the best spokesperson, orator. And so it was just natural. There was already a brotherhood within the nation of all the Muslims. So it was natural for my father and Malcolm to be connected. Again, politicians and different people and of different philosophies do not get penalized or demonized for recruiting for their cause. But when African Americans recruit or use a figure like Muhammad Ali or Malcolm X to recruit, is something's wrong with that. So the narrative is always, they're recruiting people, they're hating people. No, they're doing exactly what every other group does, right? So yes. So what I think what was pivotal for Malcolm, so their friendship was a natural thing. That was natural for that to happen. They were the most two famous figures within the Nation of Islam, next to Elijah Muhammad. So Malcolm really, I think, helped my dad navigate the media. He already was pretty good with the media, even before he became Muslim, but Malcolm helped him know how to curate those responses to tricky journalists and people trying to put words in his mouth and redefine his faith and his mission. And so he learned that skill a lot. He learned a lot of that from Malcolm X, because Malcolm X was very calm, cool, collective. And these two brothers, you understood why reading, they exemplified why reading was you banned from slavery. When you have an educated Black person, or any person is educated, you can stand up to a Harvard, doctorate degree person, right? These Malcolm X and my father were able to speak and made sure that that media machine did not define who they were, and they were very successful at that. So I think because of their celebrity, because of certain footage and pictures that are already out there, it's this impression that Malcolm brought my dad into the fold of the nation. That's not really what the history is on that.
Got it. Thank you. That's that rundown.
Yes.
And I think it's so great that you mentioned that, like, the Harvard and Yale thing, because the two of those men actually did speak at those universities. Neither of them going to college, and just shut down their audiences completely.
Right.
But I did hear that Brother A. Bailey is in the building, and we're going to segue into our dialogue with him.
Yes.
Give Mariam Ali, my cousin, my beautiful cousin, a round of applause. Thank you for joining me, man.
Yes. Walaikum assalam.
One day, the next.
I don't want that's below 70.
Baba Bailey. To start off with this interview, not interview, just public casual dialogue. Can you let the audience know, and you share with me over the phone, the story of how you ended up meeting Brother Malcolm? Can you take us back to how that began for you, your own trajectory as a young guy interested in what he was teaching, where you were, and what that first encounter was like with Brother?
Okay, there are two different things. The first time I actually heard him speak, and then the first time that I met him. In the summer of 1962. By the way, I went. My only 2 years of college was at Howard University. And I went to Howard. I don't like Howard. You know, I went to Howard University. But when I And we got there, and then we kept down 116th, and I happened to come down. Brother Malcolm was going to be speaking, and we did not know that. I just saw a crowd gathering there at 116th Street, and I said, "I wonder what what everybody's gathered for." And I asked a few people, "This was Malcolm X was going to speak," and at that time, I had a kind of a negative attitude towards him because all I knew about him was what I had heard, all the horror stories. He hated white people and he believed in violence and all that kind of stuff. So I had kind of. Because I never in my life heard anyone talk about the racial situation in this country as clearly as he did. I never heard anyone in my life, not when I was at Howard University, nowhere, and I heard anyone talk like that. And especially one thing that really grabbed me was when he spent at least 45 minutes talking about psychological warfare, attacks on the mind. I had never heard that before. I had never heard that.
I like somebody right now.
I can think about because I grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama, and I remember going Saturday after Saturday with my friends. We would go downtown to the segregated movie theaters and sit there and watch Tarzan movies after Tarzan movies, and we'd be cheering for Tarzan and Cheetah over the Africans. And I'm serious. And if you call anybody in those days in Tuskegee, I think it was not just in Tuskegee, you could call somebody a no good, ugly, a low down good, but if you call them a black, you had to fight. You call somebody black, you better be ready to fight. When I was a kid growing up, in elementary school and even when I got into high school. And so when Brother Malcolm, I heard him talk about that. So I began to go wherever he spoke in the New York City area. I went. I would go listen to him speak. Wherever he went in the New York area, I would go and hear him speak. And but I never met him. I was on a program once where he was the speaker, and I was also on the program as a speaker. And I got a picture of me just sitting there looking at him. I never said it. I spoke to him that day, but I still did not know him. Then in late December, in late 1963, a friend of mine, I was working then as a mail clerk for Time Inc. at Time Inc. And I was working in the mail room there as a mail clerk. And this young lady that I knew, she worked in the Rockefeller Center as one of the first black TV interns at NBC. I think it was NBC's at Rockefeller Center. And so we met each other. We used to eat lunch every day. And I, I thought she, very part of a new organization. And I said, yes. So it's black. She said, yes. So she said, I'll call you on Saturday morning, tell you where to come, and don't ask no questions, just be there. And I went up to this place on 100, and the place that she told me to come to is so funny. Those of us who lived in Harlem, that place had a kind of bad reputation. It was kind of like one of the places where you could check in for 2 hours, a motel where you could check in for 2 hours, that kind of thing. So I said, oh, they're meeting there? I could not understand what they're having, but she told me where the meeting was going to be.
Yes, sir.
And I went there, but you could walk into the conference, like a conference room, that you could walk into on the ground level. You didn't have to go anywhere else except into the conference room. And when I walked in there, I saw about 10 or 12 people, some of whom I had never met, but I knew of, like John Clark. And I had heard about them, but I didn't know them. There was nobody there that I knew. And we sat there, and I'm still not knowing what,
why you're here. They didn't tell you, yeah.
And after I've been there about 20 minutes, Brother Malcolm walked in the door. Well, when he walked through the door, I almost fell off my chair. I could not believe it. I had no idea until he walked through that door that I was getting ready to be a part of an organization founded by Brother Malcolm. That's when we sat down and organized the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Wow. He already had a name. It was going to be the Organization of Afro-American Unity, and it was going to be named after the Organization of African Unity, which at that time was about, it had been formed in 1963.
And he had just got back from speaking with the world leaders.
Yes. No, this is not, that did not happen. That happened in 1964.
Okay.
You know, so that's how, and I had never, I'd always liked history, you know, not knowing a whole lot, but so I heard them talk a lot about history, and I started reading books. Every book he time he mentioned a book, I would run and get it and try to read it in the library or something. And so when I met him that day, and we each introduced ourselves, I introduced myself, and he thanked all of us for coming, and that's when we formed the OAAU.
Wow.
And when they were asking people what they were going to do for different jobs, I had never even thought about being a journalist. I had thought about possibly teaching. So he said he wanted a newsletter. Because his profound belief was that when you have an organization of any kind, if you're trying to get a message out, you got to have your own instrument. You cannot depend on nobody else to get your message out to who you want it. So we had to have a newsletter to get our information. And I agreed to be the editor of the newsletter, although I had never in my life been a journalist. But I did like writing, and I did a lot of reading. So and my first article I ever wrote was about the reaction of that killing of the young boy in Harlem in 1964 when they went to the Harlem, what they called the Harlem riots in 1964. I call it the Harlem uprising.
Uprisings, yes,
In
sir.
1964 when they killed that boy. So that, and then after that, I became a functioning member of the organization, and I got to know Brother Malcolm.
Thank you for that answer, sir. And what you talked about the uprisings there that happened in Harlem after the murder of that brother, it makes me just naturally think about, today we still have, I'm looking right at a sister from my city, Breonna Taylor. We had the uprisings in Louisville, Kentucky. For me, the Clay family, the Ali family, where we're from, it's 2023, and the officers who killed her in 2020 are still serving no time at all.
Yeah.
The issues of no justice supremacy that Brother Malcolm so eloquently spoke out against and called out is still in our face today. What do you think our generation needs to do, who claims to love Malcolm, who claims to, care about his legacy? What do we need to do to actualize the vision of justice for Black people and what you all were trying to execute with the Organization of Afro-American Unity?
It's very simple. You need to get together. And things happen to us today, and some people get upset when I say this. A lot of the stuff that happens to us today, you know what I always say? That's our fault. Because we have absolutely refused as a group of people to become a unified group of people. So I'm tired of blaming other people for that. I no longer blame other people. I say that's our fault. And that's what I really believe that. So I think that, and what we need to do now, we made that mistake so many times in the 60s, 70s. We'd have maybe 20 people. 20 are just kind of, there. So we planned something that requires 20 people. And of course, it didn't work. My thing nowadays, if you got 20 people, you know only 5 or 6, plan something that 5 people can do. And then do it, and hope that some of those other people get in and help out. But don't overdo things like we did back in those days. And that's why so many organizations that we tried to get did not work, because we were going on what people talking and numbers rather than what was actually going on. And then another thing I think that we need to do is, and I've been called sometimes by people an elitist for having this position.
Okay.
You organize the true believers.
Yeah.
Once you get them organized, then you reach out to those people who you have to convince. See, at my age, I don't have time to talk to those who you got to convince and everything. This coming Friday, I will be 85.
Alhamdulillah.
My thing talk about what we can do, how we can do it. The people who need convincing, people say, "Oh, you're writing people." I said, "No, I'm not. We read for them later." But you can never organize when you got to spend most of your time trying to convince people to do something. You cannot organize. You got to organize the true believers who believe. Like I'm a strong Pan-Africanist. So my thing, if I was going to have a Pan-Africanist type thing with Brother Malcolm, well, I'm a Pan-Africanist because of Brother Malcolm. I would say, if you believe in Pan-Africanism, come to this meeting. If you don't, stay home. Because this meeting is not the people who you got to convince and persuade and all that kind of stuff. We'll deal with you. I'm not writing you off, but we'll deal with you at another time. Because we made that mistake so many times in the 70s and 80s and 90s, man. I just cannot tell you. And I'm telling young people today, do not make that mistake. Just, I don't care. And people say, "Oh, that's allegiance." I said, "No, it's not. I don't care if you're a scientist, a doctor, a truck driver. If you believe in Pan-Africanism, come to this meeting."
Thank you for the answer, sir.
And then once you get the two believers together, you get organized, you start planning things and doing things. And once you do that, then you reach out. And most people are not good. Once they see you do something successful, then a few people are going to join. And slowly more people. You see what I'm saying?
I see that, but I see also something that our generation,
Yes.
my generation, unlike what I see on the 50s and the 60s, we have gone and opted for a philosophy of flatline organizational structure, flatline leadership. So we had COINTELPRO, the FBI, informants knocking off our leaders in the 60s. We have activists today who thought that, can y'all hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Okay. We had activists today who felt if we have a flatline leadership structure, no hierarchy, there's no true leader in the group, that this is a way to organize most successfully. And that's what has really been carried out with the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm not even sure if there's enough people in my generation that are thinking on the level that you're thinking of, let's form this organization and actually have this leadership structure from place to place. What's your thought on the organizational structure that's here today? And how do we blend, or how do we move from this thinking to the type of thinking that you're talking about?
What I'm saying is just what I just said. Find the people who truly believe in whatever you're trying to do. They really believe in it. Get the people who truly believe in that and organize them. Once you all get organized and develop what you want, your plan, your structure, whatever you're going to do, then you reach out to people who you have to convince or persuade. And I'm telling you, I'm speaking from experience, because I went through that in the 60s and 70s and 80s and then learned, because we always thought you gotta have everybody. You're being elitist. This is very true. You're being elitist. And my thing was, and I did not know how to really respond. That kind of would always throw me off a little bit. But if they tell me that now, I say, so. I may be, but I don't care if you're a truck driver, unemployed, a PhD at Howard, a doctor. If you believe in Pan-Africanism, join us. That's the criteria that we have. And I think young people today, I would suggest that you do that when you're trying to organize. And when you and don't spend a lot of time, with each other. You have to assume that people who have that kind of commitment, they know the horror stories of what white supremacy is all about. So don't, every time you get together, spend 85% of the time talking about how terrible white folks are and what like that. You do that 10 minutes, and here's what we're gonna do about it.
Yes, sir.
Here's what we're gonna do about it. Yeah. You gotta be solutions oriented, and not just retelling the horror story. I mean, we know those horror stories. We've heard them, or we are well aware of them. But just we recite them for about maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then you sit down and you say, now, here's what we can do about that.
Yes, sir.
Or here's what we should do. And of course, everybody's not going to agree the same thing. You argue back and forth, discuss it. When you get finished, you come out with concrete, practical things, how you're going to respond to whatever, you know, is going down.
Yes, sir. One more. Oh, go
I
ahead.
learned that kind of thing very quickly. Again, that's one of the things, you know, see, to me, I always describe Brother Malcolm as a great human being, a great Black person, a great Pan-Africanist, and most of all, a master teacher. That brother could teach, man. And when you listen to him, you learn. Every time I heard him speak, man, I was running finding books, trying to find the books that he was talking about. And I have a book of quotes that he said that, I remember Mr. Show's bookstore in Harlem. Mr. Show had a bookstore called the Liberation Bookstore. Brother Malcolm, we go into that. Mr. Show told me one time, he said, man, sometimes I would just lock him in there. You know, because he'd come to my store and get in there one of those books. And you know, he wouldn't go home. He said, sometimes I just locked him in there. He stayed in all night. Now, Mr. Michaud told me that himself.
Wow.
So anybody who said that they are Malcolmite and they don't read, they lie. That brother believed in the importance of reading and learning and spreading your knowledge about things that were important to you.
Thank you for that. And I'll get this one here.
Oh,
No, you good, brother. You good. I want to engage you on. Okay, we had a round of applause. Who's good? So, no. Yeah, I'll take that one. This one's still giving me issues. One more question I wanted to.
This is the bookstore that Baba Bailey was just talking about. This book is about that
But one more question I want to engage with you on before we move on to the next segment. When we looked in the documentary, we saw the tremendous impact that both Ali and Malcolm had. I mean, the way that they were, you know, you spoke about when this man walked in the room and you were ready to fall out of the chair. You know, you were in front of a Black champion. When we think about the way heroes are remembered, whenever there's hero worship around a figure, certain elements of their narrative can get lost, can get resold. Me coming from the Ali family, I see straight up in Louisville, Kentucky, the same people who wouldn't stand up for him, the same people who are against Colin Kaepernick and what he's standing for, are wearing Muhammad Ali t-shirts. When we think about the colonization of our heroes and the colonization of our memory of our heroes, can you speak to what you see as someone who walked with Brother Malcolm, someone who was a pallbearer who laid our brother to rest, someone who was there with him? What did we not necessarily get all the way right, or what is clipped or tweaked in the telling of his narrative? And can you speak to that a little bit? Thank you.
I think that one of the things, you know, that Brother Malcolm was a firm believer in doing things. But he believed in planning. He did not believe in fun. When the Harlem thing occurred in 1964, around the killing of that person, he told us to stay out of it. He said, because you may not, he said, sometimes the police might have done that deliberately. So they could bring a whole lot of people out, so they could either put you in jail or shoot you. Yep. That's what he taught us. So when I went down to interview the young people who had been involved in that, I brought back and I was clearly and showed him what I had written, and I said the boy was murdered, and Brother Malcolm, this is the day before he was assassinated, February the 20th. I gave it. No, I'm sorry. That was something else. We need to tell me that. The very first time the first newsletter that I edited, I wrote an article about the Harlem thing, and I said eyewitnesses to the murder. And Brother Malcolm, told him that we had already wrote off about 500 copies without showing him. So I decided to show it to him, and he said, "Oh no." He said, "You cannot use the word murder. That's a legal term. You can only use it when the person has been convicted." He said, "Call him a killer and refer to it as a killing, because he's a killer, and it's a killing no matter what the circumstances." And this brother who worked with me, we sat down, y'all, and we didn't have the money or the finances to run 500 more copies. We sat down and scratched out the word murder and wrote killing at the top. And I still have copies of that. But that's what I mean. Now we had said eyewitnesses to the murder. We could have all been, even though they knew they had a weak case, they could have had us in court spending money and and that kind of thing. He understood that, man. And so he taught us that, you can't. Another time, when on February the 20th, the day before he was assassinated, I wrote a news release, about what had happened. 2 weeks before, he'd been banned from France. The week after that, his home was firebombed. So I wrote a fiery newsletter to pass out at the February 21st rally. I showed it to Brother Malcolm on February the 20th. He read it. He said, "Brother Peter, you can't pass this out." Because again, something in it I had said, and young people, you need to remember this. You can get tied up in the court. He said that there's something, I don't know, to this day, I don't know exactly how, but whatever it was saying something that could have gotten us into a legal thing. And they know they had a weak case, but then you be spending money and time and energy, doing that. So I had to take all 500 of those copies and set them up to the side. Now, the next day, when Brother Malcolm came into the Audubon ballroom, I was already there. And I was sitting in the little lobby area they had, getting ready running around with my newsletters, making sure they were there, people go passing out and everything. So when Brother Malcolm came in, he said, "Brother Peter, when you get a chance to come back stage, I'd like to talk to you." So I said, "Okay." So after about 5 or 6 minutes, I went backstage. Now remember, folks, this brother had banned from France, home firebomb that put his children in danger, and his wife and all his little children, all their clothes were burning. They've been burned up. And he said, "Brother Peter, I hope you understand why I asked you not. I know you put a lot of work into it. I hope you understand why I asked you to not distribute that newsletter." That's the kind of person he was. He was concerned about my feelings. And that's the kind of person he was. So when I read and hear about Brother Malcolm, they try to push around and all these things I know personally that's a bunch of doo-doo. And it's important for young people to remember that you don't want to get tied. He didn't want me to write something that was real, and then we end up having to spend 2 or 3 years in the courts fighting it, spending money and time. So you gotta be careful, not because you can say exactly what you say without going all off, and saying things they get, and because they now somebody else may do that, but with our stuff, with Brother Malcolm, they was watching every little thing like that, every little thing like that, and we're ready to close. I just want to say one last thing. A white writer named Anthony Summers wrote a book in 1993 called Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of Diego. And it's a 526-page book. It has one mention of Brother Malcolm in the entire book. But it's extremely important because he says that Diego Hoover at a meeting with Senator Lyndon Johnson. Now, if it was Senator Lyndon Johnson, that means that it happened before 1960. Because Lyndon Johnson became vice president in 1960. At a meeting with Senator Lyndon Johnson, he said to Senator Johnson, "We wouldn't have any problem if we could get those two guys fighting. We could get them to kill one another off." End of quote. Those two guys were Brother Malcolm and Dr. King. Brother Malcolm and Dr. King. Now, so you tell me how long the FBI had been watching them. This was before 1960. I don't know exactly what year, because all I know it was before 1960 because he said that he was Senator Lyndon Johnson. And I know at that time Johnson was Senator Lyndon Johnson and not Vice President. So this whole idea of them trying to absolve the U.S. government, or they were behind the assassination of both of those brothers. No, we wouldn't have any problem if we get those two guys fighting and we get them to kill one another off. And then later in COINTELPRO, they said, the second part of it, the counterintelligence agency says, we must prevent the rise of a black messiah. Malcolm X could have been one had he not been killed. And then it mentioned three possibilities: Elijah Muhammad, Martin Luther King, and Stokely Carmichael. Then it said not Elijah Muhammad is just too old, and it focused on that. So this tells you again, folks, we got to really understand what was going on. Who feared any type of close relationship between Brother Malcolm and Dr.
Thank you so much.
Now we're going to move into our next segment. Can we give another round of applause for this brother who's been in this house for so many years? Thank you, brother.
Good evening.